Good evening, everybody.
Kavod Harav, how are you? Shavua Tov.
Baruch Hashem, thank you. Okay. So we're continuing with the Bet Yosef. We had still more things to do in this chapter, so we got to finish it off. So it says like this: "V'Rav Hai katav minhag avotenu levaher chametz me'erev Shabbat le'afot matzah." So he brings what the Torah wrote about Rav Hai, who was one of the Geonim. He says our custom is to, as we said, right, to have a special custom when Shabbat falls on Erev Pesach. So what happens is that they get rid of the chametz before Shabbat on Friday. This was a custom by them, and this just makes things a little bit safe, so people can, shouldn't be worried about having chametz left over for the Passover, since it's hard to get rid of it on Shabbat. It's hard to burn it. You can't burn it. So this is the reason, right, that they had this custom, to get rid of everything on Friday, even though you're still allowed to eat technically chametz until Passover, which is the Saturday morning. You still have time. So regarding that, says Bet Yosef, כלומר, קצת חכמים קדמונים גדרו גדר שעולה להפות מצה מערב שבת, שלא יבוא לידי איסור. So he says, Bet Yosef explains it like this, right? That some rabbis made like a prohibition, made a fence around the prohibition that you shouldn't make matzah on Erev Shabbat, on Friday. Why? Because you shouldn't come to any prohibition. Klomar shelo yavo lechol matzah b'Shabbat. As we said, right, the problem is that you shouldn't come to eat matzah on Shabbat itself. Why is that? Because it's the eve of Passover, and you're not allowed to have matzah at that time. Shehu erev Pesach, or shekishireu it's a matzah b'motzi Shabbat. Miyad yomu b'Shabbat nafet. So another thing is that it looks suspicious, like actually, like you made it on Shabbat, when they see that you have matzot ready to go on Motzi Shabbat, after Shabbat. So because of those two reasons, right, the custom was not to do it like this. What does that mean? Not to bake matzot on Friday. Okay, let's go on. It says, "V'yisberu she'afiyata b'erev Shabbat docha et Shabbat." So they're going to think that baking it on Erev Shabbat, pushes aside Shabbat. So what does that mean? They think you can break Shabbat, They're going to think, right? Oh, yeah, we can break Shabbat because we have to get ready for Passover. That's not the case, right? Obviously. But he says, Maran, right? He says, our custom is not like that. We have the custom of our forefathers. So what does that mean, right? Of the Sfardim, the Spanish, right? They had a different custom, not like Rav Hai Gaon, who was from, probably from the Middle East somewhere, right? The Iraq, whatever it was. Most of the Gaonim were from that area. So, they had a different custom there. And so he says, right, Maran, that we don't have this custom like that to worry about this kind of thing. So therefore he says, "V'lo chashina lema shechashu kadmonenu, tzfei adif leafot me'erev Shabbat v'lo leacher." So he says, we're not concerned um, to that which they were concerned. These Geonim who were preceded this period, right, by about 500 years. That it's better to do to make the matzah erev Shabbat ולא לאחר, not afterwards, מלאפות בליל יום טוב שנמצא not we shouldn't bake it on erev Yom Tov שנמצא טורח ביום טוב בדבר שהיה אפשר לעשותו קודם. So it says because it comes out that you're doing exertion on Yom Tov, which was something you could have done beforehand. לכן it says therefore וגם מאחר לאכול מצת מצווה. It says also, you're going to be late because of this. Because you have to bake it on the night of, the Passover itself, and that means you're getting delayed. Instead of doing the Haggadah on time, so you're baking, doing baking stuff, which is not really the proper thing to do at that time. So therefore, he says this is the reason why, they didn't have this custom like that to do it this way. He says it's not proper to do like that. So therefore he says Ela שמנהג אבותינו ויספרו שאפייתה בערב שבת דוחה את השבת. I'm sorry, I missed something here. 1 second. Yeah, so Ela, rather he says להקדים לעשות המצות בתחילת זמנה תזריזים מקדימים. So it says therefore the proper thing to do is to make it early, which means on Friday. Right, and this way, you get it over with, and then you have free time to do what you have to do afterwards. You don't have to waste time, doing that at the time where you should be doing other mitzvot. Like it says in the first parak of Pesachim, ורבנו ירוחם כתב, says this rabbi, גם כן, בשם התוספות, נעים התוספות, שיותר טוב להפותה בערב שבת. Better to, he says, he also agrees, right, that better to bake it on Friday. Because if he'll wait until the night of Yom Tov itself, so it says again, right, he's going to do it late, it's going to be late. And it's going to be already too late, and he's going to be coming to do other mitzvot, the afikoman. So therefore, right, this is the reason why they didn't want to do it on the night of Passover itself. Right? You don't see anybody doing that, right? Baking matzot on the night of Passover, right? That's not exactly the right time to be doing something like that. Okay, so, you get the idea. I hope you get the idea. So anyway, goes on. So he says, as we mentioned, right, last week, that what's going to be is, when you're going on a late schedule on Passover, the problem is, that goes like it's a chain reaction, domino effect. So once you're late with one thing, you're going to be late with everything, So that's going to go all the way till the end of the night. What does that mean? You're going to do, right, as we said last week, that you should be doing everything before midnight, right? The mitzvot of, eating matzah and eating afikoman and the 4 cups of wine, all that stuff you should be doing before midnight. And now all of a sudden, right, because you're behind 8 ball, because you're baking matzot on that night, instead of doing the Haggadah, so what's going to be is, you're going to be running late, and everything is going to be done late. The mitzvot are going to be done late. So therefore, it says, right, it's like, you don't want to get into that. And this is the reason why, right, it says Maran that the Sfaradim didn't have this custom, like this, to be worried about this kind of thing. So therefore, what would they do? Right, they would just bake it on Friday. And this way, right, okay, well, let them think what they want to think, right? If they think that you baked it on Shabbat, it's too bad for you, right? Why are you suspecting the kosher Jew? That he does things like this. There's no reason for you to suspect that, right? So it's your problem, you got a problem. You're a very suspicious person, whatever, that's your problem. So therefore, right, the custom by them was that they didn't do it this way. They baked it on Friday. They weren't concerned about any of the repercussions from that we mentioned. And therefore, right, on the night of Passover itself, right, they were doing the mitzvot, on time, and not, worrying about baking matzot, at the last minute, what I mean? Which is really, becomes very hectic, what I mean? Okay, very good. So this is the reason why. Yeah. Again, that reminds me of certain things that happened in my life, but I'm not going to get into it now. I'm not going to tell you some stories now about my personal experiences, but anyway, right, let's go on. Let's go on. So he says, וכן מנהג העולם מלאפות בערב Shabbat. So he says, therefore the custom is, in this case, right? What does that mean, this case? Where, Shabbat falls on Erev Pesach, that, the custom is to make it on Friday, the matzot, right? Instead of making it, right, the night of Passover, right? Which is, as we said, right, not the proper thing to do. Okay, there you go, right? So that's the custom. ואדוני אבי ז"ל היה מבאר לפני השבת. So he says, right, that the Rosh, though, would do it like that, like, Rav Hai Gaon, it seems, right? What does that mean? That he would get rid of the chametz on Erev Pesach, right? I'm sorry, Erev Shabbat, which is Friday. So he was doing like the Gaon was doing, right? Not like the Sfardim. Okay, interesting. So regarding that, says the Bet Yosef, Din habi'ur habi'ashi'ur kvar nidba'er b'siman taf mem dal. It says, we already explained the laws, right, in a different chapter about, getting rid of the chametz and how to burn it and how to get rid of it and all that stuff, right? It's a different chapter. B'ezrat Hashem, once we finish the baking of matzot, maybe we'll get into that stuff, well, if we have time, right, before Passover, we'll do some other laws as well, right, which are crucial, for the Passover. B'ezrat Hashem. Okay, so anyway, right, says in the Bet Yosef, והשיעור כבר נתבאר בסימן תמ"ד, אלא משום דהווה באר רבנו לכתוב שהראש היה אופה מצות בערב שבת, כתב על כל מה שהיה. So he says, because, he says the Rabbeinu, the Torah, wanted to write that the Rosh, his father, was baking the matzot on Erev Shabbat, right? כתב כל מה שהיה, he wrote everything that he was עושה בערב שבת, everything that he was doing בערב שבת. ואני ראיתי בברצלונה, so, okay, we didn't do this tour, so we got to go back to the tour, continue there a little bit. Let's see what's going on there. Okay, so here we go. Yeah, so we have like a lot of stuff to read here in the tour. We're a little bit behind here, so we have to make up some slack here. So it says the tour like this. וכך כתב רב מתתיה על פי שחל להיות בשבת, דקיימה לן מבארין הכל לפני השבת ומשארין מזון בית סעודות. So he says, right, that as we mentioned already, there are some with the custom like this, right, that if Shabbat falls on Erev Pesach, what they do is they destroy all the chametz, and they just leave enough for 2 seudot, for 2 meals, for Shabbat, to have chametz on those two meals in Shabbat. ולמה אין מבארין הכל ויאפו מצה ויאכלו בשבת? So he says, then why don't we just, destroy all the chametz altogether, right? And just eat matzot on Shabbat. Why don't we do that, right? כדי להיעדר המצווה שלאחר שמילא קרסו, ממנה אינו מברך עליה. So he says, the reason we don't do that is because we really shouldn't be eating Erev Pesach, right, matzot, because otherwise it won't be fresh in your mouth, when you eat it on Passover itself, which is the next night, the following night, right? So you want it to be fresh. You want it to be something new, right? Something, what you enjoy. How are you going to enjoy it? How is it going to be fresh to you if you, had it yesterday as well? It's not something new. So therefore, this is the reason why we say, right, that you shouldn't have matzot on the eve of Passover, right? Because of that reason, it should be something fresh and new, right? So this is the reason why we don't do it that way. That's what he says. Uh, Ilkach al tofu matzah ela b'motzi Shabbat mipnei marit ha'ain. So he says, therefore, right, as we said, right, there's an opinion that says that you should make the matzot on Motzi Shabbat, right, which is after Shabbat, which is on the night of Passover, right? She'im atem ofim me'erev Shabbat achlim mezalzelim mitzvot mekilin ba. It says because then, right, if you do it on Friday, as we said, right, there's all kinds of things that can happen there, right? We already read about this. I think this section of the tour, I think we already read. So I'm just going to skip it over. But we'll hear continue with the stuff that we didn't read yet. Yeah. So here, right, we'll pick it up from here. It says, "V'adoni Avi Rosh Zal," right? It says, "As the Rosh, my father, hayam mevaer hakol milifnei Shabbat. He would destroy all the chametz before Shabbat. M'shaer mazon shte seudot, but he would leave enough, right, for 2 seudot, as we said, right, for Shabbat. Just the chametz, for that. Ve'ofeh mitzvah matzot b'erev Shabbat, and he would bake the matzot on Friday, right? So this is as we said, right, according to Bet Yosef, this is the proper way to do it. Ve'ani raiti beBarcelona. So he says, I saw in Barcelona, right, which is in Spain. מהמדקדקים שהיו אופים כל מה שצריכים למועד, לקודם המועד, שאם יתערב עמו משהו מחמץ. So he says, right, that there in Barcelona, they, these pious rabbis that lived there, right, they would bake everything they need for the holiday before the holiday. So why is that, by the way? Why is it better to make the matzah before the holiday? Halakhically speaking, right? So he says it's better because if something gets mixed in, right, some chametz gets mixed into it with the matzot. So if you bake it before Passover, it'll get nullified, 60th, right? But if you make it on Passover itself, it doesn't get nullified. So this is the reason why they prefer to do the baking on the eve of Passover or before Passover, right? Whatever. And this way, right, just in case something got mixed in, it gets nullified. She'd batel. Right? So that's the end of the tour. Okay, we're caught up. Baruch Hashem, we caught up. It's a miracle. What can I tell you? So as we said, right, that this is the reason why the Barcelona people, right, were doing this way in order to avoid any problems. So what does that mean? What were they doing? Right, they would make all the matzot before Passover, right, the whole batch. This way, if something gets mixed in, it gets nullified. But if you make it on Passover itself, so then it doesn't get nullified, right? Why is it, by the way, that it doesn't get nullified on Passover? Because the rabbis decreed that it shouldn't get nullified, right? It's a rabbinical thing. So the rabbis decree doesn't get nullified. But the truth is, according to the Torah, it does get nullified. It's just that the rabbis were stringent on Passover, about certain things. This is one of them. So it doesn't get nullified, if you bake it on Passover, right? It's a rabbinical thing. Okay, whatever. Anyway, whatever it is, right? So you got to be more careful when you're doing things on Passover than when you're doing things before Passover, which is a little more lenient, right? As we said. Okay, that's the tour. So we're done with the tour. Let's go to Bet Yosef. says Bet Yosef, מכאן יש להוכיח קצת דמה שכתב, אין מתחילים להתעסק בפת ב-14 עד אחר חצות שעות, 6 שעות, בכל מצא הערב אפילו אינה לשם מצווה. So it says here you can, deduce a little bit, right, that which we said, right, you shouldn't bake until the 6th hour of the eve of Passover, the matzot, until the 6th hour, until after midday. So he says it's a little bit implies regarding this, that even if it's not mitzvah, you should still do it like that. Dim lav ken ma'inyan. So if not so, he says what's the significance? Ze shera'a beBarcelona. They saw in Barcelona shayu ofin kol ma shetzrichim lamoed. They were making everything, before the Passover, right, before the holiday. Mikodem lamoed, before the holiday. Shekatvo b'siman ze, to write it in this chapter. Katav Rabbeinu Yerucham b'chelek gimel. So says Rabbeinu Yerucham, mutar leafot matzah berev Pesach kodem 6 sha'ot afilu Adayin chametz kayam. So he says the truth is, that halakhically speaking, right, you're allowed to make the matzot even before that, right? Even before the sixth hour, as we said, right? Sixth hour is the best time after midday, But the truth is, if you make it in the morning, nothing wrong with that either. There's no prohibition. Okay. אפילו עדיין חמץ קיים. Even if there's still chametz lying around, right? You haven't gotten rid of it yet. כן כתבו התוספות, that's what it says in תוספות, פרק כל שעה, ודיוקו כן מהאם מדחלות תודה. So he says they made this deduction from the chalot of todah, which is one of the offerings in the temple. ורקיקים nazir, right? Also the wafers of the nazir. עשה לעצמו, if he made it for himself, וכולי, פירוש, והוא הדין אם עשה לשם מצמצה. Same thing also applies if he made it for matzah, קודם פסח, before Passover, יום היומיים, 1 day or 2 days before, or יותר, or even more. אף אגב דאמינן בירושלמי, and even there was ירושלמי, דמצה ישנה שעשה קודם הפסח חודש או 2 חודשים. What about if it's old matzah, right? What does that mean, old? Here he's talking about that he made it like a month or two before, right, the holiday. As we said, right, nowadays in the bakeries, this is very common, they make it like a month or two before. Because otherwise, they can't make that the amount that they need to sell, the quantity, right? You cannot make it if you don't start like 2 months before. שעשה קודם בפסח חודש או 2 חודשים שפסולה משום בידוע שלא דקדק בה בחמץ. So he says, why? Because otherwise you would say, right, that it would be not kosher this matzah, right? Because you weren't careful about it since it wasn't yet the time of prohibition of chametz. Hadikdek ba shapir dami. But if he says if he was careful about it, it's okay. Just if he wasn't careful, that's what we're talking about. Af agav de chametz kayam adayin. Even though the chametz is still around, right, in the house, no problem. Ad kan eshano, that's the end of it. But got my money on perek bab. So he says, this rabbi says like this, minhag kasher shelo leafot matzah beod chametz kayam. So he says the kosher custom, he says, not to make the matzot when the chametz is still lying around, right? Because it may get mixed up together, right? Whatever, something like that. The truth is, we're not really particular about that, honestly. It's a stringency. But he says if he did bake it, no problem. In other words, even he admits, right, that there's no problem really with that. Just a stringency basically. עד כאן ונהגו כל העולם שלא להתחיל ללוש עד אחר 6 שעות ואין לשנות המנהג. So says Bet Yosef in the end, right? Bottom line. Right, it says the custom is to wait till the 6th hour, right, of the eve of Passover. Right, so therefore, as this is the reason why, as we said, right, the pious people, what they do is, they wait till after the 6th hour, and that's when they make the matzot, especially for the mitzvah, of the seder, right? Those 3 matzot that you need for the seder, that they would do right at that time, and this is considered to be like the best time to do it. So God bless, right? Whoever can pull this off, without going berserk, because you're so busy getting ready for Passover. So if you can pull it off, God bless you, right? You're with the pious people. Your portion is with the pious. Okay, good. So we're done with the Bet Yosef. Let's go to Shulchan Aruch. So the interesting thing is, I don't see any Shulchan Aruch on this. Let me just see where this was. This was going on. Yeah, it's just one big Bet Yosef. There's only one Shulchan Aruch here. Okay, so the truth is that Shulchan Aruch we already read, and I don't think it was really talking about this particular subject. But we'll just like read it over again, right? Just to make sure, get everything, remember everything. So I'll read it one more time. So we need to go to the next chapter. Maybe this is what it is. This is Taf Nun Zayin. Yeah, okay. We need to go to chapter. Yeah, this is why. That's why I don't see the Shulchan Aruch here because you got to go to the next chapter. So we'll take this away and go to the next chapter. Yeah, so it says in Shulchan Aruch, there's only one here. נוהגים שלא ללוש מצת מצווה בערב פסח עד אחר 6 שעות, right? So it says a custom, as we said, right? Wait till the 6th hour of Erev Pesach, right? And then do the matzot. שהוא זמן הקרבת korban Pesach. So what's the reason why? Because this is the time that they brought the korban Pesach, right? The Pesach offering. So these two things are juxtaposed, in the verses, and that's why they should be done at the same time. So therefore, that's why we do the matzot also at that time. So what does that mean? You wait till midday, right? What is midday? Nowadays, right? At this time of year, it's 12:10, right? 12:09 in this area, in my area. In your area, right? So see in your calendar when it is, in the midday. But the thing is that, as we said, right, every area has a different time, but there's also, I think we're going to be going to daylight savings by then, by Passover, which is in 2 months. So, it's also going to affect, right, the midday. It's going to be, instead of 12:10, it's going to be 1:10. Whatever it is, we'll see when we get there, right? We'll see when it is. The midday, right? Probably go to daylight savings until then. I'm not sure exactly when we switch over. So that's the story, right? So yeah. Then it goes on. So what about if, right, Erev Pesach falls on Shabbat, right? That means the Shabbat is the day before Pesach. So then, right, the problem is we can't bake the matzon on Shabbat, right? There's no way to do that. So then what do you do? Lashin be'erev Shabbat achar 6 shaot. So he says, what should you do? Very simple, right? You make it on Friday. Very nice, right? What do? You make it on Friday after midday, right? So instead of doing Erev Pesach after midday, you do it on Friday after midday. That's the way to do it. So, because, Erev Pesach is Shabbat, so you can't. So you do the next best thing. Okay, I hope everybody's got what I'm telling you. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll go on. Okay. So now we're going to Taf Nun Tet. Let's see what's going on there. So it says the two here, right? Another important right, section here. אין לשין במקום השמש וביום המעונן אפילו תחת כל אוויר רקיע אסור. So he says, right, that when you need the dough for the matzot, don't do it right under the sun. As we said, right, heat is very detrimental for this job because it makes everything leaven, right? The heat. So therefore, don't stand under the sun. You know what I mean? And start, kneading your dough there. This is not a good place to do that. Hashem today, right? We do everything right indoors, So there's no such a thing like that by us. The bakeries are all indoors, so there's no such a thing like that. You're kneading the dough in the sun. Okay. So then he says another thing, right, which is also right important to understand. So he says when it's a cloudy day, right? So he says it's forbidden everywhere outdoors. So why is that, right? If you know a little bit about science, right, you know that on a cloudy day, the rays of the sun get dispersed in the clouds, So it's like, so therefore, even though you don't see it so much, but the rays of the sun are coming through the clouds. So therefore you don't want to, right? You don't want to be kneading the dough under the clouds. That's what we're trying to say. So therefore, what should you do? Right, do it under the roof, right, indoors, somewhere, or under a canopy. You don't want to be under the sky. That's what we're saying. Okay. ואל תתקרב אישה ללוש אצל פי התנור מפני חום התנור. Another thing he says, right, is that, when the woman, right, or whatever, whoever it may be, right, the guy, the girl, it's all the same, right? When they're kneading the dough, don't do it too close to the oven because it's also hot there as well, So don't get like right next to the oven and knead your dough over there, because otherwise the heat will, may cause it to leaven, right? So this is another safeguard, precaution that we have to be careful. So two things we learned, right? You don't want to do it outdoors in the sun or even under the clouds. And also you don't want to do it right next to the oven because it's too hot there. So you get the point, right? It's very easy to understand. Okay. So let's see the Beit Yosef here. So says Beit Yosef, אין להשין במקום השמש, right? As we said, don't do it in the sun, right? בסוף פרק כל שעה, where's the source for this? In the Gemara, מ' ב' עמוד א', אישה לא תילוש בחמה, פירש רש"י לפי שחום השמש מחממה. So Rashi explains, right? Obviously, right? The reason is because the sun is hot. It's going to get everything hot. You don't want that. So then he goes on, and the cloudy day, right? It's forbidden everywhere outside. וכן כתבו שם הריף, under the sky. Right? It says in the riff like that, והראש and also the ראש, ודימינן פרק אמר לממונה. In this perk we said, ניומא כ"ח עמוד ב', דיומא דאבה כולי שימשה. So it says in the Gemara, right, in Masechet Yoma, there you go, right? It says there that a cloudy day, it's all sunny. What does that mean, right? It's all sunny when it's cloudy. It means that the rays of the sun are coming through there. So you got to be careful, So therefore, right, don't knead your dough outside and outdoors on a cloudy day. Right? Also, Rambam says this. כתב בעל תרומת הדשן, this rabbi said, לפי מה שנהגו להיזהר שלא לדשו תחת החלון הפתוח. This is also, right, because of this reason, the custom is, right, that we don't knead the dough next to the window, right, where the sun is blaring there, right, because of the same reason. אפילו אם החלון פתוח למזרח, he says, even if the window is open to the east, והיא לשה אחר חצות, and she is kneading the dough after midday, שכבר סיבבה בחמה לדרום, because then, right, the sun is already going towards the south, יש לחוש ואפילו ביום, says we were concerned even ביום שאינו מעונן, even the day which is not cloudy, דזימנין דמתקשרין האבים בלא עדתה, because sometimes as the clouds gather, it gets cloudy, he doesn't notice it, so you got to be careful. עד כאן השלום. That's the end of it. Okay. So then he goes on, כתב רבנו, ירוחם, says this rabbi, נראה מכאן ביום שאינו מעונן. So it says, you see from here that on a day which is not cloudy, מותר ללוש ולכתף בצל תחת הקרקיה. So then, if it's not a cloudy day, right? It says you can do it in the shade, which is under the sky, right? In other words, the sky is over your head, but it's not. The sun is not blaring there. בלבד שלא יהיה קרוב לשמש שיתחמם. But it says it shouldn't be close to the sun, that it should get hot from there. ומה שכתב ולא תתקרב האישה ללוש אצל על פי התנור מפני חמת תנור, now which is said regarding the oven, right? Not to get close to the oven as well. כן כתב בשם הראש, that's what the Rosh says there, וכן יראה שאין נכון ללוש קרוב לתנור, says that's the proper thing to do, right? Not to knead the dough next to the oven, right? Because it gets very hot over there. By the way, in those days it was worse than our situation. Why is that? Because by us, the door of the oven pretty much holds in the heat, the door is closed. But in those days, the thing was that the oven was open, like on the side. There was an opening there. So because of that, the heat was just like coming out. It was just blaring out of the oven, So this is the reason why you have to be more careful even in the old days than you have to be now. But now, if the oven is closed and it's not really hot there in front of the oven, you're okay, But the truth is that, sometimes it's very hot anyway, even though the door is closed, right? Like in my house, when my daughter here bakes her stuff, whatever. When she was baking her stuff here, it was getting quite hot, in the kitchen. It was hot, even though the door was closed. So you got to be careful, Some ovens can get very, very hot, even when the door is closed. I guess because there's not enough insulation. I don't know what it is exactly, but it is what it is. Okay, so yeah. Let's go to Shulchan Aruch. Right, so it says here Shulchan Aruch, En lashin b'makom hashemesh. Right, again, we don't need the dough right under the sun. Be careful, right? וביום המעונן אסור תחת כל אוויר הקרקע. So if it's a cloudy day, right, as we said, right, then the whole sky is a problem under any place in the sky. Mishum deyoma de'eva kule shimsha. Why is that? Because what happens is, right, that the rays of the sun get dispersed in the clouds and they come through, they seep through. So it can get hot anywhere. It's like right, what do they call that, right? The greenhouse effect, right? The clouds give like a greenhouse effect. That's what it is. Okay, you get the idea. So says the Rama, so it says, therefore the custom is, right, as we said, you shouldn't put it right next to the window where the sun is coming there. The window's open and the sun is coming through. In those days, by the way, the window was not clear. Nowadays it's clear, so even if it's closed, it could still be a problem because of the sun blaring through. Even though there's no sun there. So it says also another problem, which is that, right? So in other words, he's trying to tell you, right, don't knead next to the window. Why is that? Because even if it's cloudy, it's going to be a problem, as we said, right? So sometimes you don't notice, that it's cloudy out there, and you're like next to the window, and you don't realize that the clouds are heating up your dough, and you could become leavened. Be careful. Right? That's what we're trying to say here. Okay, good point. So let's go on. So says the Rama, וכי יש להיזהר מלהוליך המצות לתנור תחת הרקיע המגולה. Oh, another thing, right? We already mentioned this before. That you shouldn't, when you're right moving the dough, right, the to bake the matzot, don't transport it right, under the sun, or under the sky when it's cloudy, because it's also going to heat it up like that. So it's also the water and the flour, right, as well. What does that mean? Don't transport it right under the sky. So what should you do, right? If you want to transport it outdoors, cover it, right? Make sure it's covered because if it's just open to the sky, right, or the sun is coming down, or it's cloudy, right, that's going to be a problem. Okay, good. So then he goes on, right, in the Shulchan Aruch, "V'lo yitkarev lalush etzel hatanur mipnei chom hatanur." As we also said, right, there's another problem as well. The other problem, as we said, don't get too close to the oven when you're kneading, right? Because otherwise, the heat will heat it up. So make sure that when you're kneading the dough, you are quite a distance from the oven, right? Not too close there, to make sure that the oven doesn't heat it up. That's the idea. So all these things, right? You know what the reason is, because it can become leavened, from the heat. So be careful, right? You got to be careful about these things. Okay, very good. So I guess we'll stop here. Bezrat Hashem. We'll continue tomorrow. So we finished a chapter and we started the next chapter. So Bezrat Hashem. This chapter is not that short, but we should probably finish it in a day or two, God willing. So Bezrat Hashem, we'll see you tomorrow. Chazak Baruch. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Thanks for coming. And Bezrat Hashem, I don't know. I heard today, Bibi he said, right, that it's a matter of weeks until they get rid of all the Nazis. So that's if they continue fighting, because right now, right, they're not really doing so much, in the southern area, right, in Rafah there, Rafiach. So they have to go there, kill all the Nazis there. Bezrat Hashem, she said it's a matter of weeks, not a matter of months. So hopefully, right, it's a matter of weeks. By Passover, we'll be already done with all the Nazis. Bezrat Hashem. God willing, they should all be wiped out. All the Amalek. Amen, amen.
כבוד הרב,
לילה
thank you so
טוב.
much. לילה טוב.
All the best. Bye.